Zach, we are back and we are talking moves to make at this point in the Dynasty offseason. We're still kind of in no man's land. It's very quiet out there right now in the streets, depending on the league you're in, I guess. But with all that said, we're going to be diving into moves to make, some Dynasty focuses, and certifying moves to make towards the end of the video. But before we dive into anything, if you enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment down below what moves you're trying to make this week. And if you need some help figuring out what moves you should be making in your Dynasty League, check out our roster views in the pinned comment below or the YouTube description box. If you want some help, we'll take a look at your team, suggest some moves to make, how to prep for your rookie drafts, all the things. And if you want help right now, 24/7, hop in the Patreon Discord, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in on that 7-day free trial. With that said, Zach, we are going to get to the content that people came for. Tell me your Dynasty focus that you are focusing on right now at this point in the offseason. What do you got for me?
Well, obviously, we are amongst the 2024 draft season, but that doesn't mean I'm not already starting to prioritize 2025 draft capital, Bob. This isn't the 2025 class is the coolest thing since sliced bread message. This is just a referendum to stay liquid. And what does that really mean? Nobody really cares or is concerned about the 2025 draft class, Bob, and rightly so. You should be focused on 2024 and how you can make your team better. Part of that is being liquid during the 2024 season to be able to make moves when you need. And how do you do that? Well, you could have an absorbent amount of depth on your roster, which we all strive for, but I don't want to be using that depth to make a move. I'd rather be liquid in draft capital to be able to make a move when I see it necessary during or even before the season. You know, there's a lot of those catastrophic injuries in preseason, week 1, week 2, when the players' bodies haven't adjusted yet. And I want to have the ability to make a move if I deem it necessary. So I'm putting a little emphasis now before my 2024 rookie draft class, or before my 2024 rookie draft, I should say, in acquiring 2025 capital. And all I'm doing is just asking for it in trades. It's not really a big focus. I'm not saying here, listen, we do this series every week, Bob. So not all of these are like, you gotta do this. But I feel like this will make you a better Dynasty player when you just start asking for draft capital where you don't need it. You don't need 2025 draft capital right now. And I'm not saying to prioritize that. I'm just saying to start preparing yourself to be available to make moves when you need to. So I'm just asking for draft capital. I'm asking for seconds. I'm asking for thirds. It's really hard to target a first without giving something incredibly valuable. So I'm not necessarily pinpointing that, but can I get seconds, thirds, and fourths in any of these trades I'm doing right now? Being liquid in future draft capital, it allows us to make these in-season moves. So be prepared. Start that preparation now, Bob. Don't wait until after the 2024 draft, because then those picks are on the clock and they become incrementally more value. Start asking for them now.
I love this, Zach. This is a great point. As you said, just something to add to your tool belt to always kind of have that focus in mind, because we've said it 100 times on this channel, maybe not that many times, but a lot of times. That draft capital that you're talking about is going to get just incrementally more valuable every single day. They're the cheapest they'll be right now than they'll ever be. That's the cheapest you're ever going to get them again. So starting to look at them now, and a lot of this boils down to, for me, if you're trying to move off of players right now that you're like, kind of concerned with their futures, how long they're going to be viable. Maybe you're trying to retool from a team that was competitive. Maybe you won the championship. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you're just, hey, I need to get off of some older veterans, whatever it may be, or running backs. Who cares? You get the point. If you can't get the value right now in draft capital that you want, try chasing that in 25 picks instead. If you feel like this player is worth a first and a second and you can't get that right now because draft pick value is so exponentially inflated at the moment, because that's the next thing up is the draft, try chasing that same thing in next year draft capital, because I think you'll just be that much more successful with it. And that goes for if you're just trying to move off of players, but also with your point, Zach, and we've talked about this with expediting rebuilds, or if you're just trying to be competitive in the next year or to help yourself be competitive next year, having picks on the backside of when you're trying to compete with is what you're saying. Having that flexibility of those picks to move, however, to fill lineup gaps, to make player positional upgrades when a player is injured or when a player is just not performing well, or maybe this player is performing well, but you just want an elite talent that now you can chuck a first round pick onto or a second round pick up to onto to tier up to a better player. Love this point. Having, not only what's next in mind and not only what's next in mind, but then what's next in mind as well. And kind of keeping the whole spectrum of Dynasty on your plate and in your brain. And, not only having the mindset of that draft picks are only for drafting, because they're just not, and that's what makes them so valuable, incrementally more valuable in dynasties, because you can use them for so many things. Yeah, drafting for sure, trading for players, trading down in drafts to build up draft capital, trading up in drafts to get the better pieces, whatever the case is. Draft picks never go out of style, and they always increase in value. Moving on to my point, my dynasty focus, and this is addressing some of the comments we've seen in our YouTube comments lately and even in our Discord about, what the heck am I supposed to do right now if my league is kind of a ghost town? And this is, just kind of a terrible thing that happens in the offseason because people just kind of tune out. It sucks, but it's an unfortunate fact of the matter is. So right now I'm trying to do anything I can to try to drum up some activity in my league. If there's teams that need replacing, if there's, anything I can do to strike up a conversation, just drop a message in the chat, just say, here's what I'm trying to do right now, whatever the case is. At the end of the day, we can talk about all of our favorite trades and moves we want to make as much as we want until we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, and you mentioned a beautiful point last week, is you can only go as far as the moves you're able to make. And if you're just kind of, your hands are tied, you can't make moves, your league is a ghost town, it's going to be hard to make those moves and therefore better your team. So some suggestions I have, first and foremost, trying to help out your league activity. You got to know you can't control your league mates. At the end of the day, they're going to be there or they're not going to be there. It's that whole, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink kind of a thing. So all you can do is control your role in the league. And one of the simplest things you can do is show up for your league yourself. Like I said, get in the league chat, shout out players you're trying to move, use that trade block however you need to. Use that little heart tab on Sleeper to say, I'm interested in this player. If you're able to start making some trades and get things going, that could kind of start things, because a lot of times people get a notification, ooh, a trade just went down. I'm going to pop in there and see what happened. Whatever the case is, that just little things like that. Drop in, discuss recent news, somebody who just got cut, somebody who's expected to get cut. You can drop articles, you can drop NFL mock drafts that are suggesting what's going to happen with the rookie draft class, things like that. Free agency speculations, that's, on brand and coming up. So it makes sense to talk about that. Same with the combine. Anything that can help get a conversation started, it's worth throwing in there, seeing what happens. Again, you can only do what you can do. And if that's the little things you can do, there's that. But I would also suggest trying to set up rookie mock drafts. Just, hey, anybody want to mock with me? I'm trying to set up a draft, and maybe you're not doing or only utilizing players from that league or using the group from that league. Drop the mock draft link in several different chats if you have to. Getting some people involved from each league or any of your friends in the fantasy world and actually getting a mock draft done is better than trying to chase down the least inactive people in every single league and never actually getting a draft done. Because if you go to one league and there's 3 or 4 people that are just tuned out and you're, well, I just really want to draft with these people and not getting a draft done, that might be more detrimental to the league volatility going forward, because they're, oh man, this league's dead if, whatever the case is. So throw that mock draft link around, do whatever you have to. Another thing you can do, if you're a commissioner or even if you're not, you can share articles, videos that you found interesting that you felt made you a better dynasty fantasy football player. And I know at the end of the day, we don't want to share our edges with people that feel like make us a better player. We want to keep that to ourselves. And I know you're out there, you're watching this, and you probably feel the same way. I get it. I used to be that way as well. And just terms of trying to help your league out, you can only do so much. You can do all of these things, and some people just won't tune in. As you mentioned, unfortunate fact of the matter is, and in these cases, if you really just can't get a ton of activity going and you want to stay in the league, I'm not going to just openly suggest like, hey, dip on the league. I think there's probably a conversation for that at some point, but that's just definitely not my first go-to. I suggest going in, like Zach and I mentioned in a lot of our rebuild videos, a lot of our strategy videos, go back, brush up on your own strategies, evaluate your processes as much as you can, and prepare yourself in every way you can for when that activity does pick up eventually, whether it's, when the draft is finally here, when people are finally, coming back to the group chat, whatever the case is, being as prepared as you can. One great way to do that, not to, self-promote as much as we do, but, getting in a Discord, and not necessarily ours, but if you want to get in ours, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, get in there for a free 7-day trial. And this kind of helps take the edge off, I guess you could say, or kind of gives you your fix of league activity, of being able to talk about something. You might learn something. I don't know. I like to think a lot of people learn things in our Discord, but and that's not to say that there aren't other Discords out there as well. Feel free to check those out. Feel free to, support whatever brand you want to support. That's just one thing you can do, Zach. I know you are a big league activity guy.
Yeah, I really like this, and I really appreciate this also, because I don't know, man. Yes, this is a game. This is fun. I also use fantasy and dynasty as like an escape. I use it to spend my free time in a healthy place, and that's why I like the league activity, because when a league is not booming, it's not moving, then I'm looking for where can I spend some free time, where can I escape whatever's going on, and that's a much deeper conversation, but it's why I appreciate this, is because I really do look for my dynasty spaces to have a healthy outlet, and so I do other things too. I work out and so on and so forth, but I really appreciate this because I appreciate the camaraderie of the dynasty community, and that doesn't happen in a league that turns over the page and nobody talks to anybody for the next 2 or 3 months. That's not what I'm looking for. So I really appreciate this point, and you can do things to make your leagues fun. We have a Discord member, K Wade. He runs a league. And like once he did like selfie Saturday, and of course, like it's a bunch of dudes taking pictures of but it's fun. Like it's how we get to know each other, and and this is exactly what you're talking about. Like it doesn't have to be trades; it just has to be dialogue and activity, and that's why I appreciate this point so much. Is yes, we all want trades, we all want action, but like, hey, getting to know these people too. And I love this point. I really appreciate this point. I was so glad to see you put something like this on there, because it's always me. It's always me who's like, hey, have fun, poke around. But no, it's somebody else saying it. And so it just goes to make your league better and a more fun place. Like, make your league fun, do some funny things, and make sure you're doing it respectfully. There are certain ways to do it and certain ways not to do it. I mean, just make it engaging, and that's why I love this point. It's a great point, Bob. I could talk about this honestly for hours, so I'm just going to shut up and let you talk.
Plenty of comments in the last couple of weeks of just, hey, what do I do if my league's inactive? At the end of the day, you can only do so much, and it's unfortunate. It sucks. I'm not gonna say just dip on the league. Try to do everything you can. Maybe it's time to find new leagues. Maybe you've kind of passed the point of that the rest of your league is at with how active they want to be in the offseason. Maybe it's time to find some more active league members to hang out with. Plenty of leagues consistently forming in the Dynasty Rewind Patreon Discord. So another reason to possibly get in a Discord, not necessarily ours again, but just saying ours does have that ability as well. So with that said, we got a couple moves we want to make before we get into certifying moves to make. Zach, kick off your first one. We've been kind of towing around this one for a couple weeks now. We've seen a couple of trades in the certifying moves to make. I think we're both pretty interested in this player. Go ahead and talk about him.
Yeah, man, I've been wanting to discuss this for a while, and I've just been gobbling up shares, and it's a player. It's Jahan Dotson. It's a player I never really wanted. Let's go back to 2 rookie classes ago. I did not like Jahan Dotson. I just didn't feel he was worth a first round pick, which was where Jahan Dotson's the center of the dialogue was with him. It was him and George Pickens at the end of the first round. And I was just like, I'm not feeling it. Like I didn't love the situation in Washington, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But with these prices, man, I'm feeling it now. In 2 seasons in Washington, Jahan Dotson's mustered 84 catches, 1,041 yards, 11 touchdowns. For fantasy players, that's 254 PPR points in 29 games, or 8.7 points per game worth of production. Nothing sexy about that, right? Not terrible, not great at all. Here's the thing, Bob. He's caught passes from Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, and Sam Howell, all of whom have been replaced in their respective positions, shipped off to other teams, or are looking for jobs. There will be a new signal caller in place. And to me, with Cliff Kingsbury, that makes that offense exciting. We talked about last week fading pass catchers in Pittsburgh, more so looking at running backs in Pittsburgh. Well, now it's in Washington, I'm kind of, these pass catchers are very interesting. The run game might not be featured as much. I don't know. Cliff Kingsbury did come out and say this week, we have to tailor the offense around the personnel. You don't, force your personnel in, which I did like to hear that. But there will be a new signal caller in place. Could be Drake May, could be Jaden Daniels, could be Caleb Williams. We don't know. But I mean, they are not going to pass up on a quarterback at number 2. Here's the other thing. Terry McLaurin will be 29 years old at the start of the season. This season, I fully expect him to be there. $24 million cap hit. It's $29 million in dead cap to move off of Terry McLaurin. So I don't see any reason why they would move off of him. However, next year, it's only $11 million in what I believe is the final year of a contract that he received a few years ago. So we could be looking at a situation where Jahan Dotson is moving into the 4th year of his rookie contract, which they could extend the 5th year depending on how this future looks. And a new offense with a new play caller and a new quarterback. And the quarterback is going to be the best quarterback he's ever had by far. And the signal caller in Cliff Kingsbury is going to be the best signal caller he's had by far. I don't know what to make of Eric Bieniemy. Obviously wasn't that good. I'm able to buy him lately. If I had to just put a straight 1-for-1 price tag, I could just send a mid to late 2nd round pick and get Jahan Dotson in these places. And you might be watching this video and saying, that's not true. Yes, it is, because I've done it. I've bought a lot of shares of Jahan Dotson lately. So I've been buying a lot of shares of Jahan Dotson. I brought one here to the table, wanted to run it by you. I did put this in the Discord. Again, we do a lot of completed trades. We talk about these as a community in the Discord. We have a lot of different potential trades, trade questions, and completed trades. I was able to acquire Jahan Dotson and the 408 for Marvin Mims and the 307. And I honestly feel like I stole Jahan Dotson there, Bob.
I like that deal a good bit. I've never been super in on Marvin Mims to begin with. Didn't love him as a prospect, and didn't show a ton this year. Obviously, behind some pretty good talent, or at least talent enough to keep him less than utilized heavily in that offense. And that offense wasn't great. I like this move. I feel like it is pretty cheap. You got the 408 back, which cool, I guess. I feel like Marvin Mims' value right now plus the third. Basically 2/3 for Jahan Dotson at that rate is kind of how I view that trade. And then, like I said, you got the 408.
And I think that's the point there, Bob. It's not that I love Jahan Dotson. I love the value that I can get with a player who I think has a role for the next 2 seasons at minimum. And they could make that 3 seasons by the click of a button if they wanted to. In a new offense that's going to need pass catchers. And that's going to have the best quarterback and best offensive coordinator that he's ever had in his career. So I'm able to get a player that 2 years ago was worth a 1st round pick for a mid to late 2nd, or moving a player that I am really trying to move off Marvin Mims just because there's just so much uncertainty there in Denver with the quarterbacks and with the wide receivers. And I just don't understand why Marvin Mims couldn't get on the field last year. That's really what this is. This isn't a I love Jahan Dotson thing. This is I love the value of Jahan Dotson thing, which is our motto here. We don't love players. We love values. I love this value. I love the value because of what I can potentially get for a wide. I think it was a top half of the 1st round pick 2 years ago.
16.
Yeah. And I know it wasn't, this general manager's pick, this head coach's pick, but he's there for 2 more years. They're paying him buku 1st round dollars. They're not just going to throw him to the wayside. They're going to give him an opportunity in this offense. And that's all you can ask for is, hey, can I get a 1st round talent wide receiver at a discount in what is possibly the best scenario for him to be fantasy relevant moving forward? And that's what I can get with Jahan Dotson.
Whether you like or dislike Jahan Dotson a ton, I think right now he's super accessible and his situation's looking up. I think at worst case, you're buying somewhat low here. I think you got to kind of take the expectations into account here. I think probably a flex option, a decent enough flex option upside for maybe a little bit more, maybe like a wide receiver 3 on your team. I think that's okay. It's all about when you're acquiring players, having that expectation in mind. And speaking of players that I have relatively high expectations on, that I have a whopping 0 shares of across all of my leagues, and that is going to be Nico Collins. I am looking to right some wrongs and buy in on Nico Collins low-ish while I still can. Love this pick, love this player for myself. I know maybe a little obvious there, I guess, but looking at DLF ADP and Keep Trade Cut, both wide receiver 16 currently at the time of this recording, and in DLF drafts, he went as low as wide receiver 23 in those drafts. This is just beyond silly to me, but between those two formats, not necessarily in both, he's most notably behind players such as DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, Malik Neighbors, Michael Pitt. Those are the biggest, most notable players, and I can't really get behind it for me, for really any of those guys. DJ Moore, I get, just had a great season, might have a good quarterback upgrade coming in as well. Also, just had his best season. Malik Neighbors, not even on a team yet. Love Malik Neighbors, but we got to stop with the infatuation with rookie players with high upside over what players that have already done it in this league. That it just, I think Malik Neighbors can get to the wide receiver 1 echelon, or the top 12 wide receiver echelon, but then there's Michael Pittman, also just had his best season to date. Again, somebody who I like and get as a top 15, top 16, top 20 wideout, but do have some concerns with that offense. Deebo Samuel has no business being ahead of Nico Collins now. Has had one really good season, otherwise just battered with injuries, and we're just infatuated with the upside he still has at age 28 now. The upside's kind of come and gone, if you ask me. So why is he up there? DK Metcalf, probably the closest for me on this, just because I think DK Metcalf is a really good wide receiver too in Dynasty. I get it, but I'm sorry. I am all about buying in right now while I still can. Stop being slow to the buy-in because you haven't seen enough. Nico Collins, you look at his first 2 seasons, not much to show, but was also very banged up, did not play full season in either, and was playing with very lackluster quarterbacks. Now the quarterback situation is good. CJ Stroud is valued as the top 5 quarterback in pretty much any format you look at now, justifiably or not. That's where he is. Love CJ Stroud, love his talent, and I love what he's going to do for Nico Collins, in my opinion. So let's look at what Nico Collins did this last season. In all of wide receivers, he had the second highest yards per route run, which was 3.11, only behind Tyreek Hill. Pretty good wide receiver. Third highest yards after catch per reception, 7.1 yards, only behind Deebo Samuel and Rashee Rice, another exciting rookie that we like, or that I like at least. And then also third highest missed tackles for. So he's making a lot happen with the ball in his hands after the catch. 22 missed tackles forced, only behind Deebo and Tyreek Hill. Some people might be somewhat concerned with the wide receiver 1A, 1B conversation that is between Nico and Tank Dell, who's who, who's which, whatever it may be. Nico Collins, you look at targets per route run, how often he's being targeted when he's actually running a route on the field, not just out there for a pass play. 26.8%. Tank Dell, targets per route run, 23.1% of the time. So you look at this, you look at all these advanced metrics and all these things that Nico did really well and favored really well. And this offense wasn't even that good last year, in all honesty. Like, if you look at it in just a broad glance, this team was top 10 in passing yards per game. But other than that, Houston was middle of the row when it comes to passing attempts per game, passing touchdowns per game, passing play percentage per game, and they were bottom 10 in total offensive plays per game. So when you look at the total opportunity that existed for Nico Collins last year, who put together a top 12 finish in PPR leagues, not bad. I mean, pretty good finish overall. One of the least targets for a top 12 wide receiver. Right now, you have the opportunity to somewhat buy low on CJ Stroud's wide receiver 1 of the future, and what I believe to be a dynasty wide receiver 1, who, in all honesty, has already produced guys like we want Chris Olave to do, like guys like Jalen Waddle to do, although Jalen Waddle has had a top 12 season as well. But guys like Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, he's already done what we want those guys to do. Those guys are, at least Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, are a little younger, but we've already seen it with Nico Collins, and I don't advise wait and see what happens with Nico. I think the time is now. All that's holding him back right now from being higher valued, in my opinion, is Tank Dell, which, fair enough, I get it. But I think you look at these two in a prototypical lens, You have your big brother wide receiver 1 and your little brother wide receiver 2, or your 1A, 1B. However you want to break it down is fine with me. And then, like I said, you have this impending contract situation, which, I don't fear as much with wide receivers as I do with running backs, because wide receivers are very valued in this league right now. There's a lot of wide receiver talent, but it's still not to the effect of where running backs, there's just so much out there that you could kind of replace the running back you have, unless you have, Christian McCaffrey. He's pretty hard to replace. But looking at costs, looking at super flex costs for him, I think he costs just a little bit more than the 108. I think you throw a 25 third on there. I think you have yourself a fresh, shiny, brand new Nico Collins, and then it costs him one quarterback. Similar range when you look at the players that are going in the range that you're moving a pick from. 105 plus a 25 second, and maybe you get a third round pick back on top of Nico in this deal. But the pick you have to move to draft or to trade for Nico, you're drafting guys like Brian Thomas Jr., you're drafting guys like Troy Franklin, which you're hoping end up like Nico Collins. And maybe they get there a little sooner and their value ticks up that much more. Who knows? But at the end of the day, one of the most powerful things you can learn to do is take the draft capital you have when it's at its peak value and move it for players who have already done what you want those rookies to do. When you do that, you add a massive tool to your toolkit. And I think this right now is a beautiful example of how to do that. So I'm going after Nico everywhere I can. Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
100% behind this decision. This is a player that I think I don't want to say you might be able to buy a little bit low right now, because he's a little pricey, but I think he's worth it. I think he proved that he can be, the 1A or even the 1B in that offense. I mean, does it hurt his value if he is the 1B in that offense? That's like saying T. Higgins wasn't worth, a first round pick a few years ago. No, I don't know how that parses out between Tank Dell and Nico Collins, but I mean, we've seen Nico Collins be able to be the wide receiver 1 in Houston. And I do think that, they want to have some continuity for CJ Stroud. And I do see Nico Collins coming back and signing a long-term deal with the Houston Texans. It's we're still a little bit away from that, and that's something that could happen this offseason, and it would be smart of them to do, because you get a better value on the contract if you do it ahead of time. I love this. I love going out and buying Nico Collins. We spoke about a trade that I made mid-season last year where I moved Kenneth Walker for Nico Collins and a first-round pick. Because you could see the ascension come. And this was, I don't want to say this was before the Nico Collins and CJ Stroud ascension. It was during. So I don't want to say I was some kind of Nostradamus there. But I do like buying shares of Nico Collins. Let me ask you this question, because I actually have run into this, and I'm sure there are other people out there who have run into this situation before. I have Tank Dell on quite a few teams, and I still want to buy Nico Collins. Like, how do you feel about having 2 pass catchers in one offense, and not even a tight end and a wide receiver, but 2 wide receivers from what I can safely project to be a top 10 offense this upcoming season?
Yeah,
does Tank Dell stop you from acquiring Nico Collins is my question.
I would say no, because overall I still want Nico, but that would lead me to move Tank Dell later, especially like once we get to the season. He's probably a little devalued right now because of the injury that ended his season a little early, probably a little devalued. So you're not going to get a lot selling him right now. It's also a picks market, so you're probably not getting a lot for him right now. Maybe you do. I'm not saying it's, people aren't going to pay what you should have to pay for Tank Dell. I'm not saying that necessarily. It's just, I call it less likely than if you waited. I would still go get Nico Collins, and then probably look to move Tank Dell at some point for some, cross position fix or something like that. Maybe a tight end fix or whatever. I guess it could be another wide receiver too. It doesn't have to be cross position, but I don't love, I'm depending on the type of offense, I'm hesitant with wide receiver tight end combo, let alone 2 wide receivers in the same offense. That's where you really get, I think you kind of limit yourself a little bit. Not every offense, but like if you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're probably pretty content with your 2 wide receivers you have, but you get other ones that aren't maybe as consistent, as high powered, or as explosive of wide receivers in general. I think that maybe I'd be hesitant to want to keep both. I would want to move Tank Dell, though. I would still go get Nico, move Tank Dell later. That would be my move in that situation.
I also want to highlight how similar the situation is from Nico Collins to Jahan Dotson, dealing with a bad offense for the first 2 years, poor quarterback play, Now, Nico was not a first-round pick. Nico was a second or third-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Ushers into a new era of football in his third year, gets a new starting quarterback, the second quarterback drafted, a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. What do you know? Nico Collins. Welcome to the show, right? So it's a very I just wanted to say it has nothing to do with your point and everything to do with mine. It's everything you just talked about is why I talked about Jahan Dotson.
And I think that, probably the caveat of we don't expect quite the same breakout for Jahan Dotson that Nico saw. Just to
I agree
throw
with
that
that.
expectation out
I agree
there.
with that.
Okay.
But the environment is the exact same. It's the
Sure.
exact same. The reason why I believe in Jahan Dotson is because I've seen this happen the last few years where I don't care about what year it is. Who cares about third year breakout? If it's sixth year
Sure.
breakout like Devontae Parker, sure, we care. Okay. But I don't care if it's the second year. I don't care if it's the third year. If the player breaks out early, that's all I care about. Obviously, I'm not doing this video for Jahan Dotson in 2 years. But the situation is exactly the same as you just talked about for Nico Collins as it is for Jahan Dotson this offseason.
I've said it before, and I know hindsight is 2020. I feel like Nico Collins was honestly the breakout everybody should have seen coming, because in his limited workload that he had when he was healthy, wasn't great, but didn't put together like scrub seasons by any stretch in the limited work he had, playing with bad quarterbacks in a bad offense. Now we get a quarterback upgrade. The offense is a little better. Yeah, it's absolutely trending that correct way for Jahan Dotson as well. And there's some nice parallels between the two picks that we had, I guess, today.
Real quick, before we move on, Bob, I just think, to me, it's frustrating how we do everything in a vacuum in the Dynasty community. First 2 years, didn't reach this many yards. Okay, but we're just completely discarding any context, right? For Nico Collins, it was very, very bad quarterback play and a pretty bad offensive line. Same thing for the Commanders, right? Really bad quarterback play. Everyone loves Sam Howell. It wasn't that good. And, very subpar offensive line play as well. So I think sometimes we need to leave the door open for having a better discussion. And everything is so analytical, and I understand that. But let's sometimes humanize these players for a second and realize, well, Jahan Dotson's stats weren't good. Maybe it's not because Jahan Dotson sucks. It's because the environment around him does, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Context is undefeated. With that said, let's move on to our final segment here, talking certifying moves to make, where we look at completed trades right from our very own Discord completed trades tab and certify if these are in fact moves to make, whether or not we like these deals. If we don't like these deals, maybe the value's a little off. Maybe we just don't like the move that was made in general. How do we make this trade fair value if it isn't already? Or what would we do to fix the trade? Or maybe we just don't make the trade at all. We have the first one kind of out of the gates, a player we both really like in TJ Hockenson. We saw TJ Hockenson moved for Evan Ingram and the 108 to add some context. The team moving TJ Hockenson already had Sam Laporta, so they chose to tear down to Evan Ingram, diversify the asset, pick up the 108. Zach, what are your thoughts on this one?
It's a really great trade for the team acquiring Evan Ingram in 108. And I hate to say, there are certain players that I grow attached to, and I know that's not how we're supposed to do things here or whatever. I understand that, but I really do love having TJ Hockenson, because the more shares I have of a player, the more I seek them out on Sunday and Monday. I want to watch them because I have 15 shares of TJ Hockenson or whatever it may be. But this is a great trade. I mean, Evan Ingram has been great the last 2 years. I think he was top 5 tight end last year, and really didn't have any touchdowns the first half of the season. And then you can get a quarterback here at 108. This is super flex. You can get a wide receiver. This is a great 2-for-1 trade. So as much as I love TJ Hockenson, I think this is a really good trade.
Yeah, well, and I think the big thing to note for me on this deal is I love the trade to begin with. I think it's a good mindset, good process overall. Tearing down somewhat, but not a ton, and then you pick up this extra first round pick to then do with what you will, basically. But I don't feel like you took a value hit on TJ Hockenson here with the injury. Obviously, probably going to be a guy who kind of struggles out the gate. With, coming back from the ACL tear, pretty, rough injury, had to wait to get surgery done on it, whatever the case is. I don't think he took a huge value hit either. I think you got pretty dang good value for him. I think he's probably worth around the 106 to 108. If he's 108, you throw on a little plus. Evan Ingram's a great plus to get back and keeps you competitive in the fact that you have two very solid tight ends to roll with. Love this trade. It is certified to me. So moving on to the next one, I know, Zach, you are not a fan of Deshaun Watson for various reasons. Moving Deshaun Watson for Baker Mayfield, straight up. What do you think of this one, Zach? What do you think between this deal, moving Deshaun Watson straight up for Baker Mayfield? What do you think?
If I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my show sheet. This is a fantastic trade. Baker's about to get a nice little contract. I think it's going to be very Geno Smith-esque. Very 3 years, $75 million, somewhere around that. And I'd be very happy taking that from what I've seen from Deshaun Watson the last few years. Like I said, just give me the football. And I've always been a Baker fan. Again, I've always someone that's defended Baker. I've provided context. Like he's had 5 offensive coordinators in 4 years. He had a playoff road win in Cleveland. Now he's got another one in Tampa. He's a great quarterback, and I'm more so doing that in NFL terms than I am fantasy terms. I would make this move because I'm just not a fan of Deshaun Watson in general. But, keeping it strictly to football terms, he has not been good. He has not been available. And when he has been available, you haven't seen what you've wanted to see. And that has to be very concerning. I'd rather take that risk on Baker Mayfield, who's about to get locked in for at least another year or two in Tampa, if not elsewhere.
I think overall, I probably prefer getting to Baker Mayfield over Deshaun Watson. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have some concerns with Baker because his offensive coordinator that was very good for him is gone. Now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers is Dave Canales. Don't love that as much. Leads me some questions, but he should be secured in a contract. We believe currently the favorite, Tampa, to land him or to re-sign him. And I do want to move off of Deshaun Watson because I have not loved what I've seen the last 2 years between being unavailable, like you said, for one reason or another, being banged up, whatever, not doing great when on the field either. But my issue with this trade is not the destination or anything like that. It's how we get there. You look at how the Dynasty values these two, or Dynasty community values these two. Currently, DLF ADP for Deshaun Watson is player 27 or pick 27, quarterback 16. Baker Mayfield ADP of 52, quarterback 20. So it's very clear to me that, one is more value than the other. And I always say whenever we're, especially trading one for one at the same position, it should never be straight up. There should always be some other asset. I think moving to Deshaun Watson, you should have protected yourself or added more value to the Baker side that you got in return. Because of when you look at the broad spectrum of just dynasty values, as much as I want to get from Deshaun Watson to Baker, I think this would have been a much better deal if we got something on top of Baker to insulate the value that was kind of just thrown to the wind in this deal, in my opinion. I think I would have rather held on to Deshaun Watson, see him come back next year, hopefully does something where I get, Baker Mayfield almost to the extent maybe plus a first, depending on how the two start the season. I'm not saying that obviously you get that now, but maybe at Baker in a second, maybe you send Deshaun Watson in a third for Baker in a second. I would have been so much happier with this deal with that in mind. Like I said, I don't hate the destination. I don't hate the roadmap from getting from one to the other. I just don't like how we got there. It's like taking a 16-hour car ride instead of a 3-hour plane ride, if you know what I'm saying. Moving on to the next one, and this is actually Zach's deal. Spoiler alert. So we're going to dive into this one. Zach, I think you're probably going to certify this one, but I'd love to still hear where your headspace is at. I like this deal. Prefacing it already, we moved Marvin Mims, Will Levis, and the 403 for Sam Mother-loving Laporta. So you got Sam Laporta in this deal. Moving, in all honesty, really to me, when I look at and simplify trades, blur things out or whatever, I see you move Will Levis for Sam Laporta. And this is a 0.5 tight end premium. I think it's 0.5 PPR as well. So it's a full point for tight ends receiving PPR.
Takes away from tight ends a little bit there.
I still like this deal because I'm still not on the Will Levis bandwagon at this point. But Zach, talk me through your thought process with this one. I'm sure there's some team context too here, but feel free to dive in. Tell me about it. I love that you got Sam Laporta, and I thought it was a pretty good value to do it.
Yeah, this was a league where I had TJ Hockenson and Jake Ferguson, and obviously I felt that I needed a little bit more security at the tight end position. I had an extra quarterback. I think I had 3 starting quarterbacks. I am a fan of Will Levis. I like his situation there. I like Brian Callahan and the potential of what he can do there. and seeing a more pass-friendly offense. That's not me trying to fluff the value of the trade. It's just my position on Will Levis, and I do have quite a few shares of Will Levis. But I felt I was in, I think I was in the semifinal game, the game prior to the championship game last year. And so I just needed a little bit of a boost. I don't have a lot of draft capital in this league. So actually moving that fourth was one of my few picks. Again, trying to move off Marvin Mims wherever I can. And really needed another tight end. So I thought I very much won this trade. But again, it's not 1.5 points per reception for tight ends. It's not 1.75. It's not 2. It's only 1. Right. So the tight ends do not score as many points as we're typically used to talking about when we're talking about these trades. That's all I'll say. That really doesn't change very much with this trade. I just got the tight end 1. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, I like this deal a good bit. I do think it's not, terrible for either side, honestly, especially depending on how they feel about Will Levis. If they feel he can slot in as a quarterback 2 for their team and that ends up happening, I think it's still a pretty fair deal. So moving on to the last one, Zach, we saw the 101 get moved, and it's going to be dramatic, but we got a haul. But did we get enough? That's the question I have for you. So we moved the 101 in Superflex for Kyler Murray, plus Marquise Brown, plus Isaiah Pacheco, plus the 203 and the 208. Was it enough?
I like this. I like this quite a bit. I might have preferred something else other than Marquise Brown. I think Kyler Murray is really going to reestablish the value that he had prior to the ACL tear, which was he was a top 10 pick in startup drafts. I think that Arizona Cardinals team is fully invested in him. They're going to bring him a pass catcher, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr., whether it's Malik Neighbors. They're going to bring somebody in there. Trey McBride is on the ascension. They're obviously addressing the offensive line with their first-round pick next year. I really like Kyler Murray. I'm a fan of Isaiah Pacheco for the next year or two. I think he's, I don't want to say insulated, but, I mean, he's got a role. He's proven to be a very good running back and exactly what the Kansas City Chiefs need at that position. And then you get 2 more draft picks. And they're not thirds, they're not fourths. They're still a relevant part of rookie drafts. A top 15 pick and a top 20 pick. So to get 2 top 20 picks, a starting quarterback, a starting running back, and potentially a starting wide receiver. I like this trade a lot. I know this was very risky. I know this was dangerous. You talked about this earlier, getting guaranteed points. Last year, 101 was Bijan Robinson. Were you satisfied with Bijan Robinson this year? Were you happy with Bijan Robinson? 101 a couple years ago was it Breece Hall? You've missed some games there with Breece Hall. The ACL tear was really good this year, but might have been better with Aaron Rodgers. So I'm just saying 101 is never a sure thing. Like I said this last week, we always talk about the ceiling. We never talk about the floor of any of these rookies. So you got 5 commodities for 1. I think this is a really great trade. If you're moving off the 101, this is the kind of bounty you need to get.
And I think the way I always tend to evaluate trades is I take the highest valued piece on one side and the highest valued piece on the other. What's the gap between the two? To me, 101, Caleb Williams, I hope is who you're picking with this pick at this point. With everything you trade away, you got to feel like he's a top 5 dynasty quarterback. But I feel like, honestly, probably shakes up in the top 8 to start, maybe the top 10. Kyler Murray ain't far away. Kyler Murray probably a top 15 guaranteed locked in quarterback. Probably a little higher than that. That's being a little conservative. But then you get all these plus assets on top. You get Marquise Brown, who's kind of a wild card in this deal. Could end up being like, if he gets a sweet landing spot in free agency, wheels up. Whether or not he should be, there's going to be wheels up, and maybe you can flip him at that point anyway. Then you got Isaiah Pacheco, like you said, has a role. Good piece to have. Great running back too. And you get 2 picks in the nice part of drafts, 203, 208. Nothing to scoff at. I think you got well past the value gap between the 101 and Kyler Murray in general. So I'm all about this trade as well. I think, like you said, you got the bounty you needed in return for this pick.
Yeah, and then, you mentioned the value gap between the 101 and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray plays a full season, not NFL-wise, but fantasy-wise. He was still very good last year.
Yeah.
So if he just continues that, which last year was on a bad offense after not playing for a year, after recovering from an ACL, on the first year of a new if he just plays 17 games of what he played last year, I think he's a top 20 startup draft pick. That's not to say if he performs better, if he's more comfortable, if he's more recovered from his ACL rehab, he has more weapons in that offense. He's more familiar with the system that's there now. So, yeah, I agree with you that not only did he make up the value gap there, but I think when you look at this trade in a year, you're going to feel even better about it.
Yeah, well, and I think honestly, there's a world, talking about the floor and ceilings of every trade that's in whatever out there. 101 Caleb Williams drafting next year, they could be right next to each other, and there's no gap. If Kyler Murray does bounce back and we see a great player, there could be no gap, and you got Marquise Brown, Isaiah Pacheco, 203, 208, whatever they turn into, for free, essentially. And that's why I love this trade out overall. Kyler Murray, like you said, in terms of getting new weapons, currently the favorite to snag Marvin Harrison Jr. That obviously blows his stock up as well. All about this trade, like we said, this is what you need in return. I think you got all, and or you need a haul and you got a haul. But with all that said and all the moves to make in the books, I do hope you all enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below what moves you're trying to make this week. And if you need help making moves, check out our roster reviews in the YouTube description box below. See how to get one of those for yourself. Zach or I or Mike can dive into your Dynasty team and give you advice on how to attack it and suggest some moves to make more than what we did today. But also check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server for free for 7 days on me and Zach. We are oh so kind. And that discount will be there forever. So check it out. Get in on some bonus podcasts as well. See everything we have to offer over there. Get in on the beautiful Discord layout. You'll love it when you see it. But I'll love it when we see you next time. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.